Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I am here for, again, part one of my wrap up for the month of April. I'm going to do the same thing that I did in March, where I'm going to split up my reading wrap up into my romance that I read and my everything else that I read sections, just for the sake of time, because I read a lot. I read a lot of romance, so it's kind of the one genre that I can like pull to the side in case you guys don't want to hear about it. Not all of you are here for romance, but it's a recent love of mine and I want to talk about it. So I will save that for my part two. So part one is going to be my everything else section. So in the month of April, I read 24 books, which if you guys have been watching my wrap-ups this year, you know is about average for me. So while that number is very, very high, this month was not the best reading month. I read some really good things. I don't think I read any 5-star books though. I actually DNF'd my first 2 books of the year though, so we're gonna get to those first. I'm going to structure this like I have in the past with my wrap-ups, where I'm going to start with my least liked, which will obviously be the DNFs, and work my way up to my most liked. So let's get into it because this video is gonna be real long. So the first book that I DNF'd this month is Baby Teeth by, shoot, I already forget how they said this. I listened to the audiobook. I want to say Zahe Stage. I don't know how to pronounce that. I am sorry. So, I got this because I am a dark little soul and I really enjoy really messed up stories. That being said, this one was not enjoyable. Okay, so the basic premise of this is it's following a mother who has this daughter who is about 9 or 10, I think, in this book. She's 7. I was wrong. She's 7. But her daughter is nonverbal, and she is convinced that her daughter is basically the spawn of Satan. Her daughter is evil, and she hates her, and she is trying to kill her. The daughter, to the mom. Like, she thinks her daughter is trying to kill her. And, you know, it's very true. This book is so uncomfortable, and you're reading from the mother's perspective, and you just, like, feel for her because this kid is effed up. Like, she is not okay. And the mother is the only one who sees this. This daughter is an angel when the father's around. She is an angel when they're, like, in public or in a school setting. So everyone thinks that this mom is crazy, and they don't believe that this kid is, like, bananas. So, stories like this, while the writing might be amazing, like the writing is so good for this type of story because it makes you so uncomfortable the entire time you're reading it, it comes down to the fact that I was uncomfortable. I made it probably about like 75% of the way through this, and nothing was really being resolved except that it was just like amping up the like fucked upness of the story. And it was like just I was sick of listening to it. Like, I was so tense and angry. Like, I was just enraged the entire time that I was listening to it. So I just stopped. If you guys have read My Sister Rosa, that's a very similar type of story. It's a brother where it's convinced that his little baby sister is the like spawn of Satan, and nobody believes him because she's only like evil when she's around him. And it's the same type of story. And the entire time that I was reading that, I was just like so tense and worked up and angry. And this was like another type of those things. And I don't think that it was like written off as like a mental issue or like a developmental issue. Like, it was just supposed to be she was just evil, which didn't sit well with me. Like, it was, you couldn't explain it. So I didn't finish it, so I don't know if that's technically the case, but I just stopped this. You guys might like it if you like dark stories like that, but I was just not in the mood to be, like, infuriated by my book, so I stopped listening to it. The second book that I DNF'd is, like, I DNF'd it partially because I was so disappointed with it that I just, like, didn't want to continue on. And that book is What Should Be Wild by Julia Fine. In theory, I should have loved this book. This book should have been something that I was obsessed with. Like, starting this out, I was immediately going to recommend it to Julie from Pages and Pens, Mel from Mel to the Annie, because it was so Tessa Gratton and, like, Wicked Deep-ish. Like, it's very witchy, it's very foresty, has all of the makings of things that I should love, and it just didn't follow through with the writing, in my opinion. So, this is following a girl. This girl has, like, the ability to kill and take life and give life with her touch. I know that's a very cliche trope that we've seen many times, but it was actually handled really, really well in this. So she kind of gets, like, hidden away by her father, who treats her like an anthropologic study. So had it just been that story, it probably would have been great. But these chapters alternate back and forth between her story and then in the past. We go into the forest where all of the previous generations of the women in this family have gone, and they've all had this curse on them. And it's very stilted. Like, it doesn't flow well with the story, and I think it would eventually merge towards the end, but it wasn't cohesive enough for me to actually, like, want to care about both perspectives simultaneously, and one was taking away from the other, and vice versa. So, in theory, I should have loved this. I stopped it at about like 40 to 50% of the way through just because I was so disappointed with how it was being handled, because it sounded so good. It's like a really dark, witchy, cursed story that's set in like a woods where like multiple generations of women have had this curse and they like lure men into the woods. It reminded me so much of Strange Grace and so much of The Wicked Deep. And the writing started out so beautiful and dark and like poetic, and then it just kind of like crashed and burned in my opinion. So, DNF'd this. I've already talked for way too long about books that I didn't even finish. Let's move on. Alright, moving on to a book that I did finish, but I didn't really care for. I want to talk about Normal People by Sally Rooney. This was the book that I chose for Book of the Month in the month of April. And I had high hopes for this because it's set in Ireland. I will always love books set in Ireland, and I don't understand this book. I feel like maybe I just wasn't the target audience for this book, but this is a contemporary story. This is following Connell and Marianne, who have kind of revolved in each other's lives and around each other for their entire life, pretty much all the way through grade school into university and beyond. And they kind of date on and off, and they're friends on and off, and they're separated on and off, and it just follows their relationship and how relationships can change and adjust based on society and status. Might be more well off than the other, or one might be more popular than the other, and then that might shift as time goes on, and they don't handle the shift in their status in their friendship very well. It touches on issues with slut shaming, it touches on abuse, and I just don't think it was handled very well. Like, a lot of things were just kind of brushed aside so that their relationship was the main character of the story. Like, separately, they were very dry characters, but the relationship between the two people was like what kept the story alive, and ultimately it was just very disappointing. Like, I feel like I went nowhere. Like, you followed these two people for years and years and years, and you still felt like unsatisfied by the end, in my opinion. So I gave this 2 stars. I just don't think that I was the target audience for it. I think this writing style is very unique, and I can see how it could be very well appreciated and well loved. I just didn't take it that way. I was frustrated for a good portion of the story. So I gave this one 2 stars. So this is the first one going on the cards that you can see. The next book is going to be surprising for you guys, but I don't think I was in the mood for it, and it didn't hit me the way it hit other people, I don't think, because I wanted to like this, and I'm sorry, Jen and Amy. I think Amy was reading it with us too. But that is The Smell of Other People's Houses by Bonnie Sue Hitchcock. I read this, my friend did a buddy read of this for her birthday, and I read along with her, and this is a very short book, and I didn't love it. I can see how this is a beautifully well-woven story. It's set in, I think the 70s, I want to say, is the backdrop in Alaska, in rural Alaska, and it follows a ton of different people. We actually have a cast of characters at the beginning of this. So it lists all of the characters and when they appear, and then it also has a map of where they are in relation to each other. So this bounces around between basically strangers. There's a whole bunch of different people, and we follow all of their different life stories, and a big piece of this writing is scent description and color. Like, the senses are very present in the writing, which was beautiful. I loved that part of it. Everything else was following seemingly separate lives in completely different lifestyles, all set in this very rural Alaskan setting, and eventually they all start to weave together. Like, you start to see how these characters come into each other's lives. I normally like stories like that, and I feel like this had the makings to be everything that I should really, really like, but I just felt disconnected from the characters. While the writing, I think, was stunning, and I loved the descriptions and how scent was very present in it, because the sense of smell is the main sense that can invoke nostalgia, and I feel like that's what this book feels like, partially because it's set in the past, but partially because scent descriptions is how they described their relationships to other people and the places that they've been. I loved that, but I just didn't love the story as a whole. I was intrigued, but not, and like, I wasn't drawn back to this book every time I sat down to read it. I wasn't excited to read it. So I gave it 2 stars. I know. Maybe I'll bump it up to 3 just because I do think the writing was pretty substantial, but I just, I wanted a little bit more in the relationships, I think, or I don't know. I don't know what it was missing, and I think that's what I was frustrated with. Okay, moving in to my 3-star section. So, I read 2 classics this month because I'm trying to incorporate classics into my regular reading schedule, just to like have read a lot of the things that I missed out on when I was in high school and college. So, I picked 2 that I've wanted to read for a very long time, but I never got the chance to when I was in school because they weren't assigned books. So, the first one is The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. This one has always intrigued me because it sounds so good. It sounds like something that I would love, and it didn't sound as dry as just kind of like, okay, sorry, I'm gonna be controversial. I don't like Austen. It didn't sound as dry as just like Victorian London relationships. You know what I'm talking about? This follows a dude who turns into a beetle, and I was like, shoot, that sounds like a solid classic. Like, that sounds like a book that you would hear about nowadays, but in classic land, that sounds intriguing. So, I read this, I listened to it. You ready for some spoilers of this book? Like, just give me like 10 seconds. I'll give you the whole synopsis if you want it. Man wakes up, is a beetle, doesn't know what to do, his family abandons him. The end. That's the whole book. I'm sure I could sit down and I could really evaluate this, and I could pull apart all of the symbolism on how transformation can adjust your roles in your families and relationships and how society acts to change. I can understand that. I can pull themes out of this. I can understand. It ended and I was like, whoa. That was it. Like, it just abruptly ended and we had no resolution, which I think was part of the theme in that that's how life goes. But it was very short and it was just abruptly ended and I was like, oh, cool. The end. So, I gave this 3 stars. I think it's one that I might want to revisit in the future just because it is very short. It wouldn't be that hard to sit down and really analyze. But that being said, I was just kind of like taken aback. It was not as revolutionary and as exciting as I've had it built up in my head for the past 10 years. So there's that. I read that. I also got around to reading The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This is a book that I actually never got to when we were in high school. We were reading like tons of other stuff and for some reason we never hit this, which I feel like is one of the like cliche high school reads. I'm kind of glad that I didn't read it in high school because I really don't think I would have wanted to talk about this for weeks on end. So, I liked it. Okay. I liked that it had a female protagonist in, like, a strong female protagonist who stood up for her own rights in a classic. I can see how that's revolutionary. I liked that. Hester was confusing as a main character, but again, she was a pretty bitchin' strong female character. Pearl, the daughter, freaked me the hell out, which I think was a big part of the story. She was supposed to be this confusing creature that her mom didn't really know how to handle, and she was supposed to be confused about her role in life, being the result of, like, an adulterous relationship. So, there are those things. That's pretty much how I felt about it. It was very unsatisfying to me, but satisfying at the same time. I gave this one 3 stars, and I can see myself revisiting it in the future to really pull it apart. I've been reading a lot of reviews and watching a lot of reviews of it recently since I've read it, because while I was listening to it, I didn't like it. I think it was very drawn out. I feel like there were huge portions that just really didn't need to drag on for as long as they did. I liked the conversation and the controversy of how religion versus relationships and identity kind of coincide. I gave it 3 stars though. I'll probably come back to it someday in the future and like really delve deep, but I was just not feeling it when I was reading it. So, moving on. So, moving into something that is very far from the classic literature discussion and honestly just kind of some trashy paranormal romance. I read through the White Hot Kiss, what is it called? The Dark Elements trilogy by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I picked these up because I adore the new covers of them and I wanted to read them. They're one of my few Jennifer L. Armentrout books that I haven't read. They were okay. This is very much a tropey, dated paranormal romance. Did I enjoy myself while I was listening to them? Heck yes, I did. This is love triangles. This is like paranormal romance to a T. And sometimes you just need to revisit that part of your life. Am I right? I really liked Roth. He's like one of the love interests. I dig him. He was such a douchey dude, and sometimes you just need some like really cliche bad boy characters to get you through the day. So I read through all of these. I gave them all 3 stars. They're nothing spectacular, but they were real fun when I read them. The next book I have to talk about was one that I finished in April, but I technically started it in February. And that is Famous in a Small Town by Emma Mills. I technically started this for Contemporary-a-thon back at like Valentine's Day, and I just was not in the mood for it, and I kind of put it down. I didn't DNF it, I just set it down for a while. I made it like 70 pages in. I picked it back up in April, and I did finish it in like a day. This is probably my least liked Emma Mills book, but it was still an Emma Mills book, so I still enjoyed myself. I just feel like this kind of didn't really go anywhere. It follows a girl who is kind of like a type A personality who is desperate to get this like famous country singer who grew up in their small hometown to come back and do like a charity concert to raise money for her marching band. And I feel like that was like a kind of the plot of it, but the actual story is her and her relationship with her friends as they're kind of in that like transitioning into adulthood stage of their lives, and her relationship with a guy who is a half-brother who randomly gets taken in by her neighbor who she babysits for regularly, and it's her relationship with him. And it has a lot of good discussions about societal norms and how you fit in with certain people and in friend groups and in different levels of poverty and wealth, I guess, in small towns, and how dark pasts can affect you. I feel like there was a lot of things that could have been explored more in this book, but just weren't. So I liked it. It looks very fluffy and cutesy, and it kind of is, but it does touch on some heavier things. So I still liked it. I still flew through it. Her characters are always pretty substantial on the page. Like, I feel like when you're reading her characters' dialogues and you're reading, like, their interactions, you're there with them. She's very good at writing you into the story. But I don't feel like much happened in this. Like, I don't know. So I gave this 3 stars. The next book that I got to was Grayson Fury by Tracy Banghart. This is the book that we chose for the month of April for my book club. I will leave it linked down below if you guys want to read along with me every month. We pick kind of a backlist YA title. And this was the book that we read, and I liked this a lot. I gave it 3 stars because I didn't think it was amazing, but honestly, I had a blast reading this, and I had a really fun time talking about it with everybody. This reminded me a lot of The Bells. It reminded me a lot of Girls of Paper and Fire, where it's a society where basically these girls get kind of optioned into being a grace for this like royal dude. It's an honor and it's a privilege to the family to have their daughter chosen for this because all of their needs are met from there on out. But basically this girl's role in life is to be part of the royal dude's harem. So it's following sisters, and the one girl has been training her whole life to be a grace, and her sister follows her as her handmaid. And weird things happen, their roles get switched, and one gets sent off to this island that's all dark and murdery, and one has to fill her role as this new grace that she never wanted to be. So, I really liked both these characters. They were both kick-ass female protagonists. I liked the setting. I liked that the one part was kind of set on like a volcanic, Hawaiian, like Italian type island. It was just, I liked the characters. Did I think this was anything groundbreaking? No, I don't. It was very tropey. There were a lot of elements that were pulled from other books that I've read before. Do I think this is one of the best introductions to YA fantasy? Yes. This is a book to people who are like young teens who are just starting to get into the YA genre. This, I think, I would have devoured as like a 12-year-old or something because it's very quick, it's very easy to read, it's very fun to read, and it deals with a lot of tropes that you see in YA fantasy time and time again, but like with new eyes, this would have been awesome. So, I ultimately gave this 3 stars. It was a blast to read, but it was not, like, amazing. I'll probably end up reading the sequel, though, because, like, we left on a cliffhanger, so I want to know what happens at this point. The next book I want to talk about is He Will Be My Ruin by K.A. Tucker. This is another 3-star book for me. This was such a surprise for me. Okay, I've read a lot of K.A. Tucker at this point, and she's pretty much like a romance writer. Whether it's kind of like soft and fluffy or it's like a little bit darker, but most of her books revolve around a romance. So I expected that going in. I was mistaken. This is a real dark thriller, and I had no idea what I was signing up for. This is basically following a girl who goes to her best friend's apartment after her best friend has committed suicide, and she is going to kind of sort out her affairs, but also she is convinced that her friend did not kill herself. She just doesn't think that she would have done that. And when she's there, she finds out a lot of secrets that this girl was living through. She was actually giving herself to an escort service, and she was doing that behind the scenes that nobody knew about. And there was this whole romance with this like big important businessman that everybody is like making dreamy eyes at. And she is just convinced that this girl was murdered and that she did not kill herself. So it's the entire story of her trying to uncover what happened and somehow getting involved with the guys that were in her friend's life. It's a very straightforward thriller that got pretty dark and a little twisty towards the end, but I gave it 3 stars. I didn't think it was amazing, to be honest. Like, I had fun while I was reading it, but this was definitely like a one and done read for me. So 3 stars for this one. The next book I want to talk about is Starworld by Paula Gardner and Audrey Coldhurst, who are like 2 of my favorite authors. This book touched on so many things. This follows Sam and Zoe, who are these 2 girls who, one is a very popular girl and one is a very quiet, nerdy, arty girl. And they somehow start to text each other and become friends. Like, they go to school, they see each other, but their relationship is formed through texting about this star world. They basically take that texting where they're like, oh man, imagine ourselves anywhere but here. And they create this like imaginary world where they can kind of escape to when they're dealing with really rough shit at home. And both of them have some really rough shit at home. So Sam is our like loner artsy girl, and she is dealing with a single mother at home who is severely suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder, and it's kind of ruining their lives. And she also has a very distorted relationship with her father because her father is no longer in the picture, and she just doesn't understand why he left her with this. And we're also following Zoe, who is a popular girl, but is kind of hiding everything that she has to deal with at home. Her brother, it doesn't really outright say, like, what his disability is, but he's nonverbal, he's special needs, and it takes a lot out of her family to care for him. And they're going through the decision of whether they should keep on taking care of him or send him to a home that he could get the actual 24/7 care that he needs, because their mother is diagnosed with cancer, and they're kind of struggling with the concept of taking care of her and taking care of her brother. Basically, her home life is shit. So these 2 girls start to form a relationship with each other, and they're kind of helping themselves cope through the really hard nights that they have, and like when really tough times hit them, they can turn to each other. But it also shows their relationship and how it works privately versus how it would work in the actual like public school setting where people wouldn't associate them with each other. I think it was handled beautifully. It touched on really important things. Reading about the sibling of somebody with a severe disability was a huge thing that I've never read in YA, and I loved reading from that. It was a really hard perspective to read from, but it was so eye-opening to somebody who has never lived with that. And I loved seeing that. I loved seeing the relationship with a mother who has OCD and how you deal with that and how you have to kind of parent her through that. So it touched on so many really good things, but I feel like the story as a whole kind of dragged. Like, it just kind of, a lot of things just kind of kept happening to these girls, and we never reached a climactic point for a very long time. So I gave this 3 stars. I think it could have been a lot better, and I'm very curious to see if they're going to co-write things together again, because I think it worked really well, but I just wanted like a little bit more. I don't even really know what I wanted from this. Just something a little bit more from their relationship, because I feel like the focus of the story was their 2 separate lives, and I wanted their relationship to have more of a personality, if that makes sense. So I gave this 3 stars. The next book that I got to was Bird Box by Josh Malerman. I read this because I wanted to watch the movie. I'm one of the last people, I haven't seen the movie yet, but I wanted to read the book first because I'm one of those people. So I gave this 4 stars. It was real messed up. There were definitely moments, I listened to it. There were definitely moments while I was listening to it where I had to like take an earbud out and be like, oh fuck, that was real messed up. So this was similar to A Quiet Place, where you're kind of removing one of your senses and how that like really messes with your mind and it creates like more of a thrilling atmosphere. So this one, obviously you remove sight. You can't open your eyes because of these creatures that are out there, and they make you see things or do things where you end up killing yourself or killing everybody around you. So I might get spoilery with this. I gave this 4 stars. Okay, so that's the non-spoiler part. Now, if you guys haven't read this or watched the movie, actually, I don't know about the movie, so I can't speak for that. But until the picture goes away, I'm going to talk a little bit spoilery stuff. I feel like I should have loved this, how well it was, like, built up, but you never found out what the creatures were. And I know that's like playing a part into the story and how it's like leaving you like on edge where you never know. But like the entire book was building up to like finding out what was causing this, and you never got it, and it was so irritating. So I gave it 4 stars. I feel like it easily could have been a 5-star, awesome, stellar horror read for me, but it just kind of fell flat where I was just like, oh, it ended. The end. So 4 stars. The next book I want to talk about is Our Kind of Cruelty by Araminta Hall. This book, oh man, okay. This book, it's very similar to You, where you're just uncomfortable the whole time you're reading it, but not in the way the baby teeth was. Like this one, the entire time you're reading it, you're just like, oh no, oh no, no, bad. So this, okay. It's reminiscent of You, if you guys have read You by Carolyn Kepnes, where we are reading from the perspective of a guy who was in a relationship with this girl for many years, and they are no longer together. But when they were together, they used to play a game called Crave, where they would act like they aren't together. They would go out to a bar or something. They would let her get hit on, and then he would walk up and be like, oh man, this is my chick, and like get in a fight, and they would leave and go and have sex. It was like a weird kink that they had in their relationship. So this book takes place after they have been broken up, and the guy is still convinced that their breakup and this girl moving on, getting engaged, getting married, is still a really long form of their version of Crave. Like, he thinks this is all an act, and he thinks that she is doing this to kind of, like, really build up the kink in their relationship, and he is so into it. But then he starts to, like, question it because he's like, I don't know why you actually got married. Now things are gonna get really hard, but I'm still committed to you. And it's like, the whole time you're reading it, you're like, oh no, dude, stop, just let it go, man. But as the story progresses, you start to, like, question whether it's actually happening. Like, the writing is so good that, like, you're not sure if the girl is in on it, because the way she reacts to him, she should have just been like, yo, you're crazy, leave. But she doesn't do that. She kind of still leads him on. This book was so phenomenally written. I gave it 4 stars. It was a hell of a ride. I don't think it's like a literary masterpiece, but it was like so tense the whole time you're reading it, and you like don't know what direction it's gonna go, because like you think you have it figured out and you're just like, dude, stop. But then you question it and you start to question yourself. It's messed up. I really liked it. Okay, and the last book that I have to talk about is Beyond a Darkened Shore by Jessica Leek. This was like a bonus buddy read that I did with my book club because a lot of people still wanted to read it. I wanted to read it. I am so glad that I did, because this was like my favorite book of the month. So this is a YA fantasy that is set in like, I think my favorite part of this book was how well woven in the atmosphere and the setting was into this book without it being blatantly told to you. So this was set basically in like medieval Ireland, and you were just immediately set in like the dark, rainy cliffside battle scenes, like instantly in this book. The setting was just phenomenal in this. So this takes place, what year? I mean, it's not historical, it's fantasy, obviously, but it's saying, the Kingdom of Mide, Ireland, AD 1035 is supposedly the setting for this. So we are following basically like the Viking invasion, of Ireland, but at like in a YA fantasy story setting. And it was so good. It was so good. I loved everything about this. I loved the mythology and how Norse mythology and Celtic mythology was just like woven in seamlessly. I loved the main characters. There's a lot of horse stuff in it, so I loved that because, you know, I'm a horse girl. I'll always love that. I liked Kiera. She was just an automatic kick-ass female without being told that. Like, you weren't told that she was like this girl who was amazing and really badass. Like, you're shown it the whole time, which I think speaks volumes for the writing. So I adored this. I gave it 4 stars. This was my favorite book that I read of the month, and I'm so glad that I like took the extra effort to pick this up and read it. So those are the first 14 books that I want to talk about for my April wrap-up. The rest of the books I want to talk about are going to be kind of new adult, romancy-ish. Not all of them are romance, but they definitely fall in the mature audience range. So those other 10 books I will discuss in my part 2, but this is my part 1 of my April wrap-up. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it, and I'll see you guys in part 2.